Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Harbaugh Watch continues. Potential Harbaugh-geddon. Maybe. Reportedly, he's talking to the Chargers again. Reportedly, they might be trying to make a deal. Reportedly. We'll see when it happens. Again, that's how that works with Jim Harbaugh. He is forever the wild card. Texted with our guy Chris Ballas from the Wolverine earlier today. He's like, listen, he'll agree or he won't. Who knows? It's Jim Harbaugh. And I think that's probably exactly right. And I've been cruising the Wolverines message boards, and it's been fun because there is a gamut of emotions going on with these folks. And I don't blame them because it's a strange situation. They're so happy because they just won the national title. But then some of them are like, hey, wait a second. Okay, he's not on the road recruiting right now, not really capitalizing on the national title if he does come back. This is a thing. This is a potential issue. Now, I still think he's going to be Sharon Moore if he leaves. So if that happens, boom, the machinery starts to turn again. The recruiting changes. But I'm not sure what you can do from a recruiting standpoint right now if you're Jim Harbaugh or if you're Michigan, because you have to be pretty transparent, and the players know what's going on. They know you're looking at the NFL. So I'm not sure him being on the road would be very helpful right now. So we will just have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, if it happens tonight, if it happens tomorrow, we're going to pop right on. Emergency podcast, emergency show. You know how it works. But while we wait, we can talk about college football. There's all kinds of stuff going on, including elsewhere in the Big Ten, the best NIL deal of the year so far. So Julian Fleming, you know him, you love him. He's been playing at Ohio State. He's just transferred back to his home state of Pennsylvania. He's going to be a Penn State Nittany Lion this year, and potentially, at least Penn State folks hope, the dynamic receiver that they've been missing. Now, Julian Fleming at Ohio State kind of covered up by some freakishly talented people, and with Jeremiah Smith and company coming in, it looked like if he wanted to be wide receiver one, he might have to do that somewhere else. So he's at Penn State now. And oh man, do I want to buy a Jeep from Julian Fleming? So Julian Fleming has debuted a car commercial. And this is what I believe everybody thought NIL was going to be when it came into existence. Now, I told you it wasn't, because anybody with a functioning brain knew that they were going to start paying players for their abilities, football players. But the benefit of this is we do get commercials with players in them. So you get like the Coldest Crawford HVAC ad when he was playing at Nebraska. But there need to be more of these. Like the fact that we don't have as many. Like we had the cat cans one out at Kansas State with our friend Cooper Beebe, where they had the it was basically a porta potties, but I don't think you say porta potties because that's a brand. So this was a brand of portable toilets that you would use at a construction site or whatever. And they had some incredible commercials. They had one with Deuce Vaughn in 2022. They had one with Cooper Beebe this year. So far, we can't forget the Iowa pork producers. So with Iowa State, when they had Eat More Ham and Bacon with players whose last names, if you lined up the players, spelled out Eat More Ham and Bacon. That was tremendous. But the best one so far in 2024, and it sets a very high bar, is Julian Fleming hawking Jeeps. Everybody watch this.
Tired of being hammered on the price? I'll get you finance. Are you flipping your trade? We'll give you what it's worth.
All new vehicles are priced to sell.
Up to $15,000 off. Receive a $25 gift card.
If you come in and test drive a plug-in hybrid 4xe.
We have the largest selection at the lowest prices. Guaranteed.
Come to Blaze Alexander Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram.
And we're crushing the competition.
Where we're taking the deals the other guys won't.
Now, I want to believe, I don't know if this is true. We have put in a request with Penn State to get Julian on the show to talk about this. But I want to believe that Julian was the creative force behind this. I want to believe that when the Blaze Alexander Chrysler Jeep Dodge folks came to him, that he said, absolutely, I will do your ad, but on several conditions. One, we are going to have to find a gently used Toyota Camry and destroy it. And here is how I want to destroy it. I want to hit it with a sledgehammer. I want to pretend I'm flipping it. Or maybe he actually flipped it. I do like the sound effect, as the car is being flipped over. And then the coup de grace. I need to drive over this Toyota Camry in a Jeep that I will then try to sell people. That is how you make an NIL ad. That is how you get everybody in the country retweeting your NIL ad. That is how, I don't know, if I'm in the market for a Wrangler, maybe I'm calling those guys, because that is a memorable commercial. And honestly, every car commercial should be like that. Like, we've entered this age of just awful car commercials. Like, you had John Hamm waxing eloquent about Mercedes, but he wasn't soothing enough. So they had to hire the guy who played Tom Wamsgans on Succession, who actually is from England. And when Matthew McFadden talks in his real accent, it's very elegant. We don't need that in our car commercials. We need more sledgehammers. We need more people driving over used Camrys. That's what we need. Those are the ones you remember. Or, young relatives of the people who work at the car lot, guest starring. So where I live in North Central Florida, there's a small town called Chiefland. There is a dealership in Chiefland. I cannot remember what brand of car it is for, but I do remember the commercials, because the daughter of someone, I'm assuming the owner, but possibly one of the employees, years ago was filmed in a commercial. This woman is probably 27 years old now, and probably this has followed her entire life. She might have had to move. But all I know is that if you want to buy a car, it's cheaper in Chiefland. And I will remember that for the rest of my life. Just like if I want tires and I'm in Orlando, I know tires ain't pretty. And I go to Allied Discount Tire. Now, the folks who are from Orlando know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who spent any time in Orlando in the 90s knows exactly what I'm talking about with that commercial, which was the guy, his name was Sam. He was just a character he had a shoe store. Like, he was the guy you went to if you had a size 16 foot before there was an internet. And I don't know how they figured out that this guy was just great at commercials, but he wound up doing tire commercials. So this is how you do it. Like, first of all, Julian Fleming is a natural for this. Like, he looks so comfortable in this commercial. The car salesmen are trying to keep up with Julian Fleming in terms of acting. Like, he's Baker Mayfield levels of acting in this commercial. And I'm telling you, like, if this dude helps revolutionize Penn State's offense, and I realize Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator they got from Kansas, he's drawing up some big plays for him. Drew Allen, waiting to get unlocked. Like, if Julian Fleming's the one who teaches them how to stretch the field, and suddenly they're a scary offense, I can't wait for the sequel, because imagine the budget for the next one if he's one of the best receivers in the country. Like, you can move from that 2004 Camry that you're destroying probably up to like a 2013 Camry, or maybe even an Accord. Like, I can't wait for the sequel. Like, do they rent Bigfoot and let him drive over something? Because the Jeep, like, if you watch the commercial, first of all, it looks somewhat unsafe driving that Jeep up that Toyota Camry. I don't know if that Jeep is really designed to crush a Camry. So, again, this is why I think Julian Fleming probably was part of the creative process here, because he's like, you know, it'd be cool, guys. I could drive this Jeep on this Camry. And I'm betting during the filming process, there was some doubt about whether he'd get up there or about whether he'd destroy the Jeep in the process. So I just thank you, Julian Fleming. Thank you to the Blaze Alexander family of dealerships. I am all in. I am all in. Whatever you have coming your way next, whatever your next commercial is, like do you have a Drew Aller commercial? Do you have an Abdul Carter commercial? Because I'm in. I want to see these. So again, if you're going to sign these guys up for NIL deals, you're paying them to be good football players. We understand that. But put them to work too. Like, let's get some entertaining commercials out of this deal. I am very happy with this. I hope this inspires some players at some other locations. Like maybe Julian calls some of his Ohio State teammates from back in the day, and he's like, hey, guys, so you're not going to believe what they let me do. I know some dealerships in Columbus. We could give you a call, give you a hookup, and you could be driving your trucks over gently used sedans. Because that's honestly, it's what I want to see. So very happy that this is happening. Very happy that the players are in the commercials. Let's have some more of this. Keep it up. Keep it up. And also I'm happy about that I can pop on Prize Picks at any time. And you can too. You download the app, use the referral code Andy. They will match your first deposit up to $100. And it doesn't matter what sport is going on, because right now there are a lot of sports going on, and you can do the NFL, the NBA, college basketball, men and women, cricket, esports. It doesn't matter. The way you do it, you pick your squares. So let's say you're looking at the NFL games. Brock Purdy, is he going to be more than, less than this amount of yardage? Is it a goblin square where it's more of his yardage, or sorry, the goblin is less, a demon square where it's an even higher yardage total, but if he's more than that, you could potentially win more money. So you pick between 2 and 6 squares. The more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. It's so much fun. Great, especially if you're going into NFC, AFC Championship Sunday. You have some little college basketball, play around with that, do a little NFL. It is some of the most fun you can have with this kind of gaming. So sign up for Prize Picks today. Use that referral code Andy. Instant deposit match up to $100. It's a big week for this. Lots going on. I've got a quad box of college basketball games up right now. There are so many ways to play. So get on Prize Picks. Use that code Andy. Instant deposit match up to $100. No Prize Picks squares for the college football season in 2024 yet, but we are definitely talking about what happens next. And one program that we have not discussed much this offseason, because not much has changed in the way of the roster, in the way that the other programs have changed their rosters. Yeah, I'm talking about Clemson. Clemson has avoided using the transfer portal in the ways that most of its opponents have used the transfer portal. And we've talked about it quite a bit on the show, as where Dabo Swinney fits into this thing. We talked about it when the Alabama job opened up, and people said, okay, what about Dabo? And you say, he's not using the portal. I don't even think Alabama would consider him, because you have to do that to be competitive in this day and age, don't you? Well, Grace Raynor from The Athletic, who covered Clemson for a long time. Now she's in a little more national role, but she went back to her old stomping grounds and did a really great deep dive on where Clemson is right now and what happens as Dabo either adjusts or doesn't to the changes in college football. You saw it last year. They started 4-4. They won their last 5 games. They finished very strong. Dabo says buy stock in Clemson. The question is, should you? Are they going to come back? Is it possible to come back and be national title contenders again without doing any of the same things that everybody else is doing, without building your roster the same way that 99% of the other teams are building their roster? It's a fascinating question. And you got a guy who's won 2 national titles since 2016. He made some staff changes this offseason that I do think could be helpful. But is it enough? Does he have to stop being so stubborn to get back to where they were? We talked about it with Grace. We are joined by the great Grace Raynor of The Athletic, who wrote a story that could not have been better timed because of the question I got yesterday that blew my mind. So Grace has a story in The Athletic on Tuesday about Dabo Swinney and is he going to change with the times? Is it ever going to happen? And Grace, I will pose the question to you that someone posed to me on social media earlier this week. If I had told you 5 years ago that Alabama would open in 2024 and Dabo Swinney wouldn't even be considered for it, what would you say?
There is no way I would have believed it. Like, he would have had to have been out of college football for me to even fathom him not being a candidate 5 years ago. Right.
If he had just said, I'm leaving, I'm gonna become a minister, or I've decided I'm done with this, I'm going on vacation forever, like that.
Yes.
That's the only thing that would have made sense, because 5 years ago they were coming off crushing Alabama in the national title game. Like, that was January 2019, and it's amazing because so you covered Clemson as a beat writer for a while, and now you have a broader role at The Athletic, so you deal with a lot of other programs. I'm curious, from your standpoint, what's it been like to watch Clemson kind of be kind of the same as everything else is evolving around it?
It's been a little bit surreal, honestly, to see them go from the very top of the sport to where they are now. And look, I think a lot of teams would feel really lucky if they had the past couple seasons that Clemson has had. I don't want to diminish that, but it's just kind of crazy to see it switch so fast. And so I do think that Dabo is going to start evolving, but obviously we've seen that it's just been slower, and now we're kind of seeing he has to if he's going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, it's crazy because we kind of blanket statement Dabo doesn't use the transfer portal when we talk about it on the show. That's not entirely true. Like, they had transfers on their roster last year. I think they had 4, and he has gone after people in the portal this year. But like, when somebody from Shorter College, which produced current Florida State tight end Colin Morlock, by the way, but when somebody from Shorter College in D2 says, no thanks to your offer, I'm going to go. I think he was going to go to Penn State and then wound up at Maryland, but is going to Maryland instead of going to Clemson. Like, it feels like something's off.
Yeah, I think that's what's stunning is when you look at sort of who they've lost to in the portal lately. Maryland being one of them. I guess Penn State had him first, but then he flipped to Maryland. Georgia Tech, Arkansas. Like, these are programs that Clemson has had no problem crushing in the high school ranks and the high school recruiting. And so you look at the disconnect about, okay, well, why can't they seem to land these guys in the portal that they are landing out of the high school ranks? And yeah, it's surreal for sure.
Well, so you go back to last season, they started out 4-4, and then really great run at the end of the year. Like, not to take away anything from how they finished last season, because it was outstanding. They beat Notre Dame, they beat South Carolina, beat your rival, win your bowl game. And Dabo's talking about, okay, buy stock in Clemson now. But I keep wondering, like, should we be buying stock in Clemson, or should we be buying stock in like more Florida State stock or some Miami stock right now?
It's so hard because you look at Clemson and there are definitely reasons to believe they're going to be better, right? Like, Klubnik is going to be more experienced in year 2. I think the receivers, the way they recruited that position was much needed this offseason. They've got a couple stud freshmen coming in. They're not losing many pieces on offense outside of Will Shipley. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism, but then you do look at how other programs have sort of plugged in their holes with these portal guys. And you look at how Florida State completely transformed their whole team with the portal just getting a couple of key pieces. And that's where I think Clemson's really fascinating, is that, yes, their players are going to be better, but are they going to be able to compete with the 22, 23, 24-year-olds who are ready to come in and be studs immediately on teams that they're playing against? I
thought was really interesting. I think it was Eric McLean that said that, the former Clemson offensive lineman who works for the ACC network, and it was a great point so Clemson is still trying to develop all these guys out of high school. In a lot of cases, the younger guys are having to play pretty key roles. And so the schools that they're playing against who are using the portal more are sometimes throwing a 22-year-old at those people. And it's a different type of human being at that point.
Yeah, it is. I thought Eric made a really good analogy when he was like, not using the portal would be like an NBA team not relying on free agency and just building solely through the draft. And I thought it was really fascinating that, obviously he played for Dabo. He's very familiar with this program. And he said, Dabo is such a competitive person, which I think some people don't realize how truly competitive Dabo is. But you would think that as competitive as he is, this is what Eric was saying, like you would think he'd want to go dominate the portal and just show people like, I can come in here and still do it my way and still dominate the portal in the way that makes sense. He just hasn't done it yet. And so they've tried, but we'll see if they make any sort of meaningful impact coming up here.
Yeah, it's interesting because all of his contemporaries, Saban before he retired, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, all of those guys are willing to go try to get the big fish out of the portal or take somebody who was a starter on a team that maybe is considered lower in the college football hierarchy than them if they needed to fill a spot. But like I go back to the Florida State game last year, which was a great game. Clemson took them to overtime, and the Clemson fans got really mad at me for saying this after the game. But like, if you put Keon Coleman on Clemson instead of Florida State, that one player, Clemson wins.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is a disconnect. It's like Clemson doesn't need to overhaul their roster on the portal. They don't need to go get 20 or 30 guys. They need 2 pieces, 3 pieces. Like you talk to people around Clemson, it's they need an offensive lineman and they need a wide receiver, and that's it. Maybe a DB in years past, but it's no more than 3 or 4 people that they need.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. Now, what one thing I thought last year was going to start this evolution, and it didn't feel like it did, was when Dabo he fired Brandon Streeter, who was a homegrown coordinator, and he hires Garrett Riley. And I thought, okay, there's a chance that things are going to change. It didn't feel like it did, but I do wonder. Like I'm looking at 2 hires this year where it feels like maybe that's coming, because Garrett Riley's a young guy. Don't know how much he can push back on all-time great coach Dabo Swinney. But he brings in Matt Luke to coach the offensive line and Chris Rumpf to coach the defensive line. Matt Luke was the head coach at Ole Miss. He's worked with Kirby Smart at Georgia. Chris Rumpf has worked all over the SEC. He's worked in the NFL. He's a South Carolina Gamecock working at Clemson now. Like, I imagine they respect the hell out of Dabo Swinney, but I'm sure they'll probably speak their minds.
For sure. And I think those were 2 really smart hires for him in that regard. And that was something that Mac Lane was also talking about is, hey, when you fill out your staff, because Dabo's been very loyal, right? He's hired a lot of former players, a lot of former assistants. But when you fill out your staff with people who only know one way, it doesn't create any sort of discussion or opportunity for something different when you're in the room. And that's where I think you bring in these 2 guys. Like you said, they're veterans, they can push back, and also they've just experienced other things. They've seen different things at different places, and I think that gives them a little bit more clout in the room.
Well, and the other thing that I find interesting, and I had not really thought about this until, I guess, last year when things were going south in the early part of the season, how much did Brent Venables really mean to this program? Because, you think about a coordinator leaves, it's like, okay, you can keep it going. But it didn't start rolling really until Venables got there in 2012. Like, he taught them how to play dominant defense opposite of an up-tempo offense. So like we always point to the hire of Chad Morris and the hire of Brent Venables as what kind of was the launching pad for Clemson to get where they were. But I do wonder if Venables was maybe the more key person in all of that.
I thought when Venables left that he was the most important and critical hire that Dabo had ever made. I mean, it just completely transformed that unit that had given up 70 points in the Orange Bowl,
Yes.
and just looked like a totally different unit. And then I think too, the thing about Venables is he had some experience elsewhere. You know, you talk to people around the program, and he's a guy who is also going to be able to push back on Dabo a little bit and say, hey, maybe we modify this with the portal a little bit. We see how he's attacked that at Oklahoma. And just his mindset, I think, was so crucial. I will say their defense has been very good under Wes Goodwin. I think they were number 8 this year. So the product on the field has still been very good. But yeah, that's just a veteran voice in the room that you're losing.
Another quote that really jumped out at me from that story you wrote is from Ben Boulware. So for those who don't remember, Ben Boulware was a starting linebacker in 2015, 2016 on that national championship team in 16. Ben will be the first to tell you that he was not the most gifted athlete on that defense, but he also played with some incredible players. And he said in your story, it feels like the talent is not where it was back then.
Yeah, that really, because we look at it from the outside looking in, and I think that that's something that we've all seen. But to hear a former player, also say, "Hey, this talent is just not where it is, or where it used to be," and he sort of walked through every position, and that is part of it. I mean, they're recruiting at a very high level, and so it's kind of the chicken or the egg. Is it a recruiting issue or a development issue? But you just look at the results, and these wide receivers are not T. Higgins. Klubnik is not Trevor Lawrence. You know, it's just, that's the other part of it, is that Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and T. Higgins and Travis Etienne, I think in hindsight might have masked more issues than maybe we thought.
Well, and that's the thing. Quarterback is the obvious one because it goes Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and they have not been able to recapture that magic. But how many programs have had a Deshaun Watson or a Trevor Lawrence in the time since? There aren't that many people like that. But then receiver and D-line are the two, and they've had good D-lines, but not loaded with first-rounders D-lines. And the receiver position is amazing to me. Like you just mentioned some of the, like T. Higgins, but you think about it, Nuke Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, early career Justin Ross before the injury, Artavis Scott, like even guys like Amari Rodgers and Artavis Scott, who we don't even talk about, but were great players in college.
Yeah, that's a position to me that I think is the most glaring. I mean, Clemson hasn't had a wide receiver drafted since 2021, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And that's Amari Rodgers and Cornell Powell. And yeah, that's the one position I haven't been able to wrap my head around. Okay, is it development? Have they missed? I think you could make arguments for both. That position to me just has a lot of question marks that I'm curious to see if they can figure it out next season.
Well, and that's the most interesting part. And what I just said, I didn't even mention Hunter Renfrow just now. Like
Renfrow, yes,
probably
totally.
the most, one of the more successful NFL players too, coming out of that, who was also great in college. But like, that's the thing. Like, and the receiver position is actually kind of emblematic of the Dabo Swinney era at Clemson, because I always thought when they were at their best, they mixed these high 5-star guys, the Christian Wilkins and the Trevor Lawrence, with the guys that they kind of unearthed. Like Nolan Turner was Dabo obviously played with his dad and knew him really well. But those were the kind of guys that they would unearth. Isaiah Simmons, Hunter Renfrow. But the receiver position is the best example of that, because you got like the Hunter Renfrow, Adam Humphries, who under-recruited, that they developed. And then you've also got Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, Justin Ross, who everybody in the world wanted and were good immediately.
Yeah. I think it was Roddy Jones I was talking to about this. And he was saying, and I thought he made it such a good point and summed it up so well. He was like, you could take the number 3 receiver on Clemson's playoff teams and put them on this current team that we saw this past season, and they'd be the top receiver. Like, that's just how stacked they were and just how loaded they were. And to your point, it was a great mix, and they developed so well. And I still think that Clemson has that evaluation piece and that developmental piece. But it was just perfect harmony, because for every Hunter Renfrow, they had a D-Hop.
Yeah. Artavis Scott would be putting up massive numbers
Right? Yes.
as
Right?
wide receiver 1 right now.
Yes. Totally. Totally.
Yeah, it's that, and I do think that's a piece of it that needs to be figured out. So, do you think that Dabo can turn this around? Do you think that he can make them a national title contender again in the age of the 12-team playoff, or do you think he's going to let this pass him by?
I will say every single person that I talked to for this story, even the ones that pushed back on some of his philosophies, were very adamant that like Dabo Swinney is not done and that there is every reason to believe they can get back there. I think obviously the 12-team playoff is going to help him. He is slowly coming around with these portal offers, and maybe they'll land 1 or 2 here in a little bit. We'll see. But I think the thing about Dabo is that, yes, he is stubborn, and yes, he can be a little slow to change, but he is so competitive, and this is his legacy and his program and his name on the line, that I don't think he would be content with just letting it ride off into the sunset.
Well, and getting back to how we started this thing, like I never thought, even if Alabama had gone after him hardcore, that he would even go, because he does want to. This is his legacy at Clemson, and
yeah, he is Clemson.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the competitive part. Like Sean Alexander, who had Dabo as a position coach in college. I'm going to try not to mess up the quote here, but basically this encapsulates Dabo, because Sean basically says, oh, he'll smile at you, but he's got that goofy aw shucks thing, but he'll slit your throat if he has to. And like,
I've heard
that
this too.
is who he is. He is that. You're right. He is that competitive, but it is amazing to see there's this thing that everybody else is using and it's working, and he just won't do it.
I don't know if it was wanted to try it his own way first and then come around a little slower, or, obviously you look at the portal and you look at NIL, and I think that's part of it. And Clemson is not a huge alumni base. It's not doesn't have a big, huge donors. I think that's part of it.
It's I pay 10 a year, not I pay thousands a year.
Exactly. Yeah, IPTE is a very grassroots organization, as one person that I talked to said. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think if he had gotten there in his own way, it would have really changed the way we think about college football. But because he is going to have to evolve, I think we're going to see him sort of slowly start to move in that direction. Well,
it's going to be very interesting, because I do really like the hires he made this offseason. And so, like, every time I'm about to be out and think, it's
he makes you come back in.
He does, he does something that sucks me back in. So I am very excited to see what this looks like. Our mutual friend Ari Wasserman says, no, they're on the decline, been on the decline, they're going down. I'm not ready to believe it yet.
I'm not ready yet. I'm not there yet. Not in the 12-team playoff era, and not with these 2 wide receivers they have coming in from the high school ranks. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, if it's still the same, maybe, but I'm not there yet either.
Well, not just the receiver, like Sammy Brown, the linebacker from Georgia. Like,
yeah,
that's a guy, that's a Dabo Swinney 5-star right there. Like, everybody in the world wants him, but he wants to go play for Dabo. Like, that was Christian Wilkins back in the day. That was, those were the kind of players that they would get.
Yeah, totally.
Will Shipley was that kind of player. Now, I don't know if they had
Tristan Lee was a 5-star. Yeah.
Yep.
Barrett Carter, you just go down the list. Like, they're still recruiting very well. I think they're at 12 right now, which is, they were in the teens when they won their national championships. So he's got his formula.
Yeah, that formula for the national championships did include generational quarterback, though. So that maybe
it did. That is
the stumbling block right there. So.
Yeah, exactly. Trevor Lawrence was a huge part of that formula.
That's right. Grace Raynor, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy.
One update, that Prize Picks ad we had earlier, I neglected to mention there's a free square for the NFC Championship game. Christian McCaffrey, well, essentially free. He does have to gain 1 rushing yard to hit. But they did a thing on Monday night where if they got enough retweets, they would reduce Christian McCaffrey's rushing yardage number, and they kept reducing it, and it is now at 0.5. So it is essentially a free square. So remember, Prize Picks, you start with 2 squares. So it's a good place to start for the NFC Championship game, AFC Championship game. If you want to do something on Sunday, that would be the place to start. So Prize Picks, use the code Andy, and they'll match you up to $100. All right. The great conversation with Grace Raynor. The Clemson thing fascinates me because I just don't understand why Dabo won't play the game. And I know people say, well, he has his principles, but it's not about your principles. This is within the rules. Nobody's going to criticize you for playing the same game as everybody else that is generally accepted, widely accepted. And it's not, like Grace said, they do not have to overhaul the roster. If they could selectively, like if they would recruit in the portal the way Michigan has recruited in the portal the last 2 years, I think it's a 2 or 3 win difference. It's the difference between maybe beating Florida State or not beating Florida State last year. It's incredible. Chris in the chat, just look at Georgia. They bring in multiple transfer portal wide receivers every year. Dabo could at least do that. Yes. If you're not going to recruit receivers or develop receivers at the level that you used to, and let's be real, you're not. That stat that Grace threw out with no receivers drafted since 2021, mind-blowing, but true. If you're not going to do that, then bring in some that are already good. It will help your offense. But the transfer portal giveth and taketh away, as we know. And we've talked about it take a thing away a lot at Alabama of late because the names leaving through the portal were very, very big. But now that the dust has settled on this a little bit, I think it's time to have a more clear-eyed conversation about Alabama. So let's bring in Tim Watts from BamaOnline. Let's talk to him about where the Crimson Tide stand. We're not quite. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks since Nick Saban retired. Let's talk about where Alabama actually is right now. Now by the great Tim Watts of BamaOnline. And Tim, it's time to calm everybody down. The last time we talked to you, the world was going to hell in a handbasket. Nick Saban had retired. Seemingly every Alabama player was entering the portal. All hell was breaking loose. But now that we're a couple weeks removed from Nick Saban retiring, Kalen DeBoer's been on the job a week and a half. How's everybody feeling in Tuscaloosa?
You know, I think the Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs hitting the portal was kind of like the point where they said, all right, you know, it is what it is. Both of them went into the portal. Their worst nightmares were kind of coming to realization. They thought Caleb Downs was going to Georgia. Alabama had their defensive back coach, T-Rob, go there. So there's a lot of conspiracies connecting them. Caden Proctor, who we had said many times was homesick, even during the season, they thought he was going to be an NIL guy. We heard a lot of Ohio State talk. So I think that when those kids made their decision, when Caleb went to Ohio State, Proctor went back home to Iowa, I think it alleviated a little bit because, you know, it's not good you lose those players, but it's also not the conspiracy that you're seeing. Also, it's slowed down since then. Alabama got a quarterback, Austin Mack, which really set off another. You know, Alabama fans have just been on a roller coaster where you get Austin Mack. They don't really know who he is. And we took a lot of time digging to help figure out who he is. And he's a very promising prospect by all accounts.
Well, he was the guy Kalen DeBoer signed at
Yes.
Washington, who was with them at Washington last year. And like, that's the part with the Julian Sayin thing, that when Julian Sayin enters the portal, it was not a coincidence. It was the morning after Austin Mack committed to Alabama.
Yeah, I would think that Alabama told them the night before what was going to happen. And Austin Mack, again, you know, we've said this, he's 17 years old right now. He's going to be 18 in June. It's absurd. He could be a high school senior. That's not unheard of for a high school senior to spend his senior year at 18 years old. But he's going to be into his second year of college by then. But, yeah, that was a domino. Austin Mack, they've got a lot of faith in him. They like him. And if you just watch him and learn about him, he's dude, you see him on the recruiting visit this weekend. They had 6 official visitors. He was one of them, even though he was committed. Dude, he is a foot taller than seemingly everybody. And, I mean, we're talking about some pretty nice-sized kids. Jalen Milrose, 6'2", Ty Simpson, 6'1", are in that range. This guy looks humongous. almost looks like the movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger standing by Danny DeVito. He is a good 4 or 5 inches taller, and he's big. He's got big features. So they got that commitment once you got them settled down and knew what they were getting. Their worst fear when you took it, though, was exactly Julian saying leaving. So Friday morning when he left, I think that kind of kicked it off. And then you have to walk and talk yourself through it. Big visitor weekend. He's starting to answer. At one point, there was a lot more questions than answers. So we're slowly but surely seeing those answers so it's easier to understand. And I think that's been a big part of common Alabama fans' nerves.
Yeah, and the Downs and the Proctor things were also, you kind of, if you address them individually, I think you're right. If Downs had gone to Georgia, then it really plays into everybody's fear. Okay, they hired Travaris Robinson away. He might be grabbing all these guys that he helped bring to Alabama. But Downs ends up going to Ohio State, which actually finished second the first time around. And the factor that sent Downs to Tuscaloosa initially was Nick Saban. So that made sense. Proctor going home makes sense because that's obviously not usually the offense you're going to pick if it's NIL based or it's NFL based. Though Iowa has produced some good offensive linemen, but given where they are now, it's a little bit tough. So that does all make more sense. Let's talk about that visit weekend because some guys that are in this class. Ryan Williams, basically last unsigned 5-star.
It's a big one. Yeah, it's a big one. And, he's committed to Alabama for a long time. Auburn, and, he named his school. There's nowhere in the country Ryan couldn't go to college. Shows up at Alabama. And I tell you what, preceding him on his official visit, because he decommitted right away, he had an out to eliminate Alabama. He had the out. Nick Saban's gone. A lot of the staff is gone. Travaris Robinson's gone. Holman Wiggins is gone. Tommy Reese is gone. A lot of the guys that he dealt with there. So he had an out if he wanted to take an out. But instead, on Monday, Ryan shows up in Tuscaloosa to hang out. We broke that news on the roundtable and on BOL. And then we look up and he is hanging out with Jalen Mbakwe, who's one of his best friends, the 5-star signee from Clay Chalkville. Middle of the week, the Alabama staff goes down and sees him again. And then he comes for an official visit, brought a lot of people close to him. So he got a full week's worth of getting to know this staff. And, he did an interview with AL.com. The guy, I think Alabama's very much in this. It's always seemed like that was a special place to him. He's always wearing Alabama gear. Even in his pictures that he showed from his visit, it showed a picture of him with an autographed ball when he was a kid. So obviously a humongous target for 50 reasons, 5-star in-state, but also the dude is extremely talented. And you're looking at a guy that, and Kalen DeBoer and Grubb, who love the route running. Jamarcus Shepard's known for his route running ability, and there's nothing on that route tree that Ryan Williams can't run. So it's more than just, the visual, but that plays in because the kid's extremely talented. Well,
and I would imagine that DeBoer and Grubb can show a receiver prospect like Ryan Williams, hey, here's Roma Dunze, here's Jalen Polk, here's Jalen McMillan, here's what we do with really good receivers. Here's how that looks. And that, because everybody's saying, oh, these guys don't know, they don't know the area. They don't know. But what they put on film in the last 2 years, especially with quarterbacks and receivers, would probably be fairly enticing.
And they also brought in Jeremy Bernard, who is the number 4 wide receiver on that Washington team, behind 3 extremely talented wide receivers. Still a guy that, you can see his clips, very talented. He's able to come in and also explain what they're going to do. He committed while he was on his visit. He was one of the 6 official visitors. So, yeah, you put that on tape. You show them what you can do. And also the thing that really helped Alabama in the South is that Washington, if they aren't in the playoffs, I'm not sure a lot of these Southern kids have actually seen them. Different schedule, late night games and all that. But they saw them in those 2 games against Texas, and they saw them against Michigan. So they've got some kind of feel for exactly what they can do and everything else. So it's not like they were going in blind to them like they probably would have been had they not been in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Once they beat Texas, and lots of people watch that game, but also then you get wall-to-wall Washington offensive highlights for a week going into the national championship game. So if you hadn't been exposed to them, all you had to do was flick on ESPN and you were going to see them over and over again. So that probably does help at least, give those guys an idea of what they're looking at. But also, I thought it was interesting. I was looking at BamaOnline, and on your message boards, you guys have the updated scholarship chart that you keep consistently updating every time something changes. And when you look at it, just all the names, it feels a lot more calmed down than maybe it seems, because I don't know that there are many other programs that have that level of talent still on the roster.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people were really excited to see Alabama lose everybody and lose all their talent. That hasn't been the case. I think 9 guys have hit the portal since Nick Saban retired. Everybody else is pretty much expected during the first go-round. I don't think there was a lot of surprise. And to be honest, the Alabama had to lose guys in the first portal window because they had to clear room for guys that wanted to play elsewhere so they could be at, on the number 85 and get down to that scholarship number. So they have a really good team if you look at it. I mean, we've discussed this before, and I think it's a debatable point, but how many teams would not swap their roster for Alabama's where it sits right now, not even counting possible getting Ryan Williams or Jabbar Muhammad, who's looking at Alabama, Oregon, and Texas, just where it sits now. How many teams have an A to Z better roster? There's certainly guys like Texas, Ohio State did a good job, Georgia. Those guys have got really good staffs.
That's probably it, though. The 3 you just named. I think that's the only ones that would say we'll keep ours instead. If you offered to trade, those are the only 3 that'll say we'll keep ours.
Yeah, they've had really good recruiting classes the last 3 or 4 years, have a lot of talent, had another one this year. All 3 of those did well. Texas hit the portal, did a good job in the portal, and Georgia got the running back from Florida. So they've all got talent. Ohio State closed out well with their portal run and, everything they did and, with the transfer. So, yeah, those are 3. Others might argue, but I think you could argue right back that Alabama's roster is better than them. And that's not even counting if you could get a Ryan Williams and a Jabbar Muhammad. Again, that makes the roster much better right out of the gate. And then you've got that spring portal period. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Alabama, again, has a 1, 2, 3, 4 top 5 roster when you come out of April and that portal window closes again.
Well, that was interesting. Like hearing Tyler Booker, the offensive lineman, he went on the next round live with our friends Ryan and Jim and Lance, and was pretty unequivocal about it. Like, hey, don't even be calling me if you're a coach of another team. And it's funny because obviously we're in the man bites dog business. Like we talk about the things that are unusual, but the dog bites man situation, and there's a lot more dog bites man going on that roster than man bites dog. Like most of those guys are staying.
Yeah, I think that was big for him. Obviously, I think when you saw the initial flood of guys that went in, Amari Niblack, Isaiah Bond, those were guys that they were halfway out the door to begin with. I mean, I know there were some heavy discussions with NIL. The first portal go round, which is odd because they were never in the portal to have all these heated comments. You go back to that Proctor. Proctor just went, some poor guy interviewed Proctor, and he just said, yeah, I was in contact with me the whole year. I'm not sure what's going to become of that. So I think we got some obvious tampering going on because Booker said it too. He had coaches reaching out to him and contacting him. So what's eventually going to happen is some school is going to send, screenshot a text and send it somewhere out in the public. And, you got to be quite the deal rod to be a coach and text these players. But I know it is happening.
Oh, so, it was happening before the transfer rules changed.
Tim, that's smart. I mean, you cannot be directly contacting. You got to be the dumbest human being on earth to just think that's a safe move.
The next time they actually punish somebody for the tampering will be the first. So
yeah, that's true.
As my friend Max Olson at the Athletic always puts it, they don't want to enforce the tampering rules because coaches would all like to reserve the right to tamper.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, you got Michigan possibly opening up here, another 30-day portal window. I don't know about you, but the 30 days is absurd to me. 30 days is 1/12 of the year. That's, I told Travis Reier on our BOL podcast, I said, that's like you get 30 days for your third shoplifting. You go to, that's a short time in the county jail. So, I think that's too long. And then Bama's still in that 16, 17-day window. If Michigan's opens up, we're going to go through another 30 days. So just a lot happening with the way they've got this calendar set up.
It will be interesting to me, Tim, to see if Michigan's different because they're deeper into their class schedule than Alabama was.
Oh, for sure.
Because I'm not sure how easy it is going to be to go somewhere right now. Like Alabama, you had to, like, even though you had 30 days, you really had to get in there in the first couple days if you wanted to go to another school and be there for spring practice. I don't know if Michigan opens. I don't know how that works. Like,
I would think
the
talk is that they're handing it to the offensive coordinator, right? Sharon. So they do that.
Sharon Moore is probably the guy getting it if Harbaugh leaves. So I imagine that calms it down too.
Well, that would be the move because surely he's been working these guys. First of all, they're familiar with him, and that's kind of what happened with the Alabama when you had the whole coaching staff. Basically, you don't know if they're being retained. So in essence, they're in limbo. You have them not knowing. So these kids that were recruited, you look at Caleb Downs. I tell people, and I'm not going to be harsh on anybody that wants to hit the portal or do whatever they need to do. But Caleb Downs lost Charles Kelly. Pete Golding was in the recruiting process at one time for him. He lost Charles Kelly, he lost T-Rob, he lost Kevin Steele, and he lost Nick Saban. I mean, basically everybody kind of associated with Caleb, was gone. So I can kind of see his angle that maybe he wanted to try somewhere else and get out of the South. I did find it interesting. Georgia was so prevalent to be the leader when, like you said, they finished second. Ohio State finished second. We don't even know Georgia finished third because the question was, who did Alabama beat? And he said they beat Ohio State. So we knew the 1-2. We don't even know where that's sat.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just, tough decisions for kids, having to make them quick. So all of it's very interesting.
Yeah. And so now you get to see, as the first, 2025 offers go out from the Alabama staff, how the staff is going to work. Is there any noticeable difference yet, or do we have to wait and see how this process shakes out between now and say June and July when they start taking a lot of commitments?
Yeah, I think you're still in the, almost the honeymoon phase. I mean, you're still figuring out who to offer. They were in state and went down and saw Micah DeBose, a big-time 25 offensive lineman. They offered some some quarterbacks. They offered Juju Lewis, the big-time guy from Georgia that's committed to USC. They offered the Deuce kid, McKnight, who's committed to Notre Dame. So they got some quarterback offers out pretty quick. Casey Lacey, the Saraland quarterback, came down for an unofficial visit while Ryan was on campus. So I think they let it be known early on to the quarterbacks they got a type and what they want to look at. But I still think they're in the evaluation process, right? I mean, they're having to get on the road, and they're going to be on the road from the morning till the night. We've seen Kalen DeBoer has been very active, but they're going to be on the road morning to night. So at some point, they're going to have to evaluate and break down the film because they won't necessarily like the same players that Nick Saban and his staff liked. There could be different guys, and that goes down to the guys that decommitted. The underclassmen who were committed, everybody was kind of like, they haven't contacted them yet. Well, they weren't very familiar with them. That's for one thing. And it's not for sure. It'd be rare that the new staff would like everybody the old staff liked. That would be a rarity.
It would be, but it does seem like with the quarterbacks, you have to get out there quick. But
for sure,
quarterback recruiting is also nationwide anyway. So I'm guessing Kalen DeBoer already had a fairly broad 2025 quarterback board, even at Washington.
Yeah, but the top guys are all committed. You start looking at the commitment list. You got Underwood to LSU, Juju to USC, George McIntyre committed. Monday, taking a quick glance, the top 6 guys are already committed, along with number 8 and number 10. So 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks are already committed. Now, it's not locked in stone, but quarterback's usually the position that we've seen hold on the strongest to their commitments, even though Dylan Raiola did flip from Georgia to Nebraska. But for the most part, most of them kind of hold the course. But, man, it's early, and dominoes are moving around, and, musical chairs are being played. So, but, yeah, you want to get out, let them see you're on the radar, and just kind of push and, let them know what you're about.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting next few months. Kalen DeBoer does not strike me as the kind of guy who's going to do anything rash or wild in those first few months, but it does feel like things have settled somewhat. Now the portal window is open for another.
It's a lot.
I'm bad at math, but for 13 days now or so.
It's probably like 16 or 17.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because I told you
Wednesday. It's 2 Wednesdays ago that this happened. So tomorrow.
Yep. So it's open until basically 2 weeks from Friday. Yeah.
Well, it would go from Wednesday when Saban retired, right?
Yeah. So it's the next day. So it'd be 2 weeks from Saturday is when it'll close.
Well, he retired Wednesday, and DeBoer was hired Friday.
Yeah.
I'm telling, hey, we've had days so wrong, I can't even keep up with them. Like I thought Saturday was Sunday because the NFL had games on. That's why I was confused.
Well, especially because your head's just been spinning since Nick Saban retired. Like
that's how you said we think it's slowed down. I can tell you 100% it's slowed down because I've slept normal, and I've actually seen the wife and kids. All the guys on BOL can tell you the same thing. Hectic and just a million questions. I don't blame the Alabama fans. We've never seen this before. You've never seen the greatest of all time retire. In an era where, there's social media like there is and message boards and everything else. So, but yeah, it was a continuous effort. And I'll tell you what I don't miss is that the good news was followed quickly by the bad news. Every time you got something, it was something bad coming on the heels of it. But you got the staff in place. They got the coaches they want. It seems to be an upgrade. It's going to be seems to be a good staff, but also you got them out on the road because, there was that weird thing to make it even more difficult is that the Washington coaches were hired or going to be on the job, but they had to sit out a little bit longer, apparently because of something going on with their contract with Washington. So that kind of kept it in the loop. But they did have, I found it interesting. It was pretty good for the Bama fans to see. You knew they had Freddie Roach on the staff along with Robert Gillespie. So you knew what was going to happen there. But also you got to see Clinton Dix, Josh Chapman, Denzel Duvall, old time guys that are, working in that back office, get out in the streets and meet people. And hey, believe it or not, it's not hard to believe, but those guys are pretty popular on that campus.
I bet. And I bet with recruits, they got quite a testimony.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you don't really see them because when we talk recruits, we talk about the area position and the head coach, but those guys all do that support staff. Ashley Kimball, they all do a great job. Bob Welton was retained on this staff. So there's a lot of connections that you don't see visible with the coaches. But they'll be able to point them in the right direction. At the end of the day, recruiting's relationships. If you build them, you can recruit.
Yep. And the question is, is the head coach going to be as aggressive a recruiter as the previous head coach? Not many in the whole world are. So
I've never, See, I just think, that's a bar. I don't know if any Kirby's, cut out of that same cloth, but I just don't know. I don't think anybody, including Kirby, enjoyed the recruiting process. I think he liked recruiting more than he liked coaching, honestly. I think he loved the relationships and the visiting and them coming and the dancing and getting to know people. I think and his wife, she loved it. She was actually a huge valuable point. So nobody's ever going to do it like Nick Saban. Nobody's going to recruit like he did.
Yeah. It's funny because people see Nick Saban press conferences and assume that he didn't like talking to people.
Yeah.
He loves talking to football players.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. But, for years we would hear stories and they would basically freeze them out. They tell the kids, don't put up the video or don't tell the stories. We heard stories about Saban dancing, Saban at the lake, all the go-kart stuff, little go-kart in his driveway. We heard these stories about the basketball. But they literally was like, on pain of death, don't report them. And the kids wouldn't do it. But once these phones got as good videos as they do, it was kind of over. We've seen so much of it. But, he's always been a guy behind the scenes people love because what people wanted to see, and he wanted people to think that, I think, publicly, was the guy spanking A.J. McCarron or cussing because he got hit in the head with a water cooler. He wanted that intense business life, but it was a much different animal with the recruits.
Well, I actually think two of the better recruiting things that came out of Alabama in the last 8-9 years since the smartphone social media era began, the electric slide.
Yeah.
And that Zoom call. That Zoom call, and I can't remember who the player was.
But that Zoom call was out. I remember that.
It was the best advertisement for Nick Saban's program that you could possibly put out there because it was just his recruiting pitch, and he wasn't talking down about any other school. He wasn't making any outlandish promises. He was just saying, "We're going to give you a chance to be really good, and if you take advantage of that, then it'll be good for you."
Yeah, I had a third one. Is his lake days. Those are really popular. The video, him dragging guys around and them slinging them off floats and that stuff, and wearing his Yankee shirt. You never expect. You wouldn't if you didn't. You never would have known that was behind the scenes. But even back in the day, we'd hear stories of they'd go to Nick Saban's house on Sunday to have brunch and ride gators in the woods. He was doing fun stuff with these recruits the whole time. He just didn't want anybody to know it.
Well. Then he realized it became a recruiting tool, and he's like, A couple things slip
I
out.
think he saw the first video of himself dancing and realized I'm not that bad. So I'm okay with him knowing because he knew
The
what
man
he
was a
was
Division
doing.
I DB. Of course, he can do the electric slide. Let's be
Sure.
real about this.
Yeah. But he loved it. So that was fun. But yeah, I think, Kalen DeBoer has been really good. I mean, I don't even know how long it's been. We're rolling up on, a couple of weeks of this hiring and everything that's went on. And, Alabama's coaching search lasted 41 hours. Basically, it might have been done before that, but we knew around 41-hour mark. He was in Tuscaloosa in like 52 and a half hours from Nick Saban retiring to him landing in Tuscaloosa, which is absurd. I mean, you didn't expect that. And, coaching searches are usually so crazy. You see what's going on. Alabama's last coaching search was Nick Saban making you wait.
Protracted, yeah.
Nick Saban made you wait longer than the portal window is right now. That's how long it was that he had to wait. So, I mean, it's changed. So it to be done so quick, and then coaches on the road and staff named, and he's got a couple commitments. They got, Parker Brailsford. They got a center, a good center, freshman, second team All Pac-12. I mean, he's a guy they were excited about. They got a wide receiver. They got a quarterback monster, big old kid, 6'6". Look, he was listed at 6'8" in our database. So I went and dug it up, got some sources at Washington. He was 6'6" and 1/8 is what he was to start the season. Those photos don't look like he's just 6'6". He does not. He is so much bigger. Yeah, he is so much taller than everybody else, but big hands, everything, and again, a young guy. So they've got some positive things going in their direction. Still need a few more things to fall their way. They've got Noah Carter, 24 edge rusher, linebacker type, Jack linebacker type, and he's looking at Alabama really hard. Came on an official visit. So Jabbar Muhammad, cornerback at a need position. They're in the running for him. So he has a few more things fall right. Maybe Ryan Williams on the 9th. I think there'll be a lot more positive going into the spring. And hey, who is not going to be excited to see this spring game?
Nope. It's going to be another sellout crowd. So all Kalen DeBoer needs to work on right now is Cupid Shuffle, electric slide. Make sure you got that down and you're good. Tim Watts, where the world is not ending.
Not yet.
In Alabama. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Anytime.
I do want to see Kalen DeBoer electric slide videos. I mean, as soon as those are available, let's get them out there. A couple congratulations in order before we sign off tonight. Congratulations to South Carolina basketball coach Lamont Paris. His first win over a top 25 team. The Gamecocks just upset Kentucky. There was a court storming. Did not look like anybody ran into a Kentucky player, so that's good. I did see a lot of phones up in the air, so nobody followed my advice after the Caitlin Clark thing. Everybody's still trying to film themselves or film what's going on while they're running onto the court. Don't do that. Just enjoy it. Now they look like they're having a good time in the court. Also, congratulations are in order to former University of Tennessee quarterback Todd Helton, elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's right. Todd Helton, former Rockies great, for those who don't remember, was a quarterback at Tennessee. Actually, was the second QB in that 1994 season opener against UCLA. After Jerry Cole quit, I believe he tore his ACL. The third QB who came into that game was a freshman named Peyton Manning. He did okay too. So 2 Hall of Famers from that Vols team. Not too shabby at all. So Tuesday's over. We don't have any Jim Harbaugh news just yet. We might have some tomorrow. We might have some later this week. We might have some later tonight. Who knows? But what we do know is Wednesday, unless Jim Harbaugh takes an NFL job, is a Dear Andy show. So I want to hear your questions. You can hit me up on Twitter, Andy_Staples, Instagram, Andy_Staples, Andy Staples on 3@gmail.com. If you have a long question that doesn't fit into a post, you can email it to me. We will answer them on the show tomorrow night, unless there's massive news. And then we will still answer it at some point. But please send me your questions. I love hearing them, love helping direct the show through the folks that are watching and listening. So Andy_Staples, Twitter and Instagram, Andy Staples on 3 at gmail.com. Get those questions in. Cannot wait to talk to you tomorrow night.